Okay, so we are recording. Now, Bernie, this is not live, so it's just recording, so we can pause, we can look at things on the internet if need be, whatever, and I'll just edit. Okay. Good morning, everybody. This is Steve Savadesky, publisher of BayouBuzz.com, and today we have Bernie Pinsonat, the president of Southern Media and Opinion Research, more, and we're going to be talking about the presidential race a little bit and the elections here in Louisiana. Good morning, Bernie. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Stephen. Good to see you.
Well, thank you. It's great seeing you. So we've survived, I guess, the elections, the presidential elections, and I think the Louisiana elections of the fall. And what's your take so far?
Well, we have the United States Senate election left, and in East Baton Rouge Parish and probably other places, we have another election. We have the runoffs for various races and issues in various parishes, but the big one is, especially in EBR, Baton Rouge, is the mayor's race, and then of course the one that has national implications is the United States Senate race here in Louisiana, which now in the runoff we have State Treasurer John Kennedy facing Public Service Commissioner from around up in North Louisiana, northwest part of the state. We have Foster Campbell. So we're not concluded. We have another 3.5 weeks of campaigns to put up with, but I'm not so sure you can have a lot of noise in the Senate race, because the chances of Kennedy losing are literally slim and none, because I think we're seeing Trump in Louisiana got maybe the highest vote totals of any candidate. He was very popular in Louisiana. You could tell early on that for some reason he struck a chord here, and he did very well in the polls from start to finish.
Yeah, I think he won by 20%. Am I correct?
Yeah, we had a big turnout, unlike Ohio and some of the states where the so-called blue wall was there. Looking at those turnout numbers and looking at the urban voters versus the the city voters, Louisiana voted, right at 70%. In some of those places where the Democrats really had to have a good turnout, I was shocked to see how poorly the blacks turned out. I mean, Wisconsin, of course, she doesn't even go there. So, but in Louisiana, that's just the opposite. Most of the southern states had huge turnouts. In the Rust Belt, you had big turnouts of what we call, working men and women. I guess you'd say they used to call them the Reagan Democrats. Now they're the Trump Democrats. So it didn't really catch people by surprise if you were looking at his rallies and the enthusiasm for him versus the enthusiasm for her. But here in Louisiana, the Republicans are the dominant party. We had sort of an aberration last year when Bitter, who was the worst candidate maybe we've ever seen, literally elected John Bel Edwards. And but the saw the New York Times talking about the Louisiana race, and the odds are it's 90. They put it at 99%. It'll stay in the Republican column. So that's where we find ourselves today. But the thing that probably your listeners and viewers are more interested in is the Louisiana Senate race, and the poll that you put up that I gave you in about the middle of October it was really pretty accurate. The numbers were just about dead on. We did a good job on that poll, and yet I had headlines across the state. Small poll predicts Kennedy, Campbell. But unlike the national polls, by the way, the analysts, I didn't go out and say that they were a cinch. And I think that's what, we're hearing a lot of criticism of pollsters, but I don't think the poll numbers were that bad. I think the analysts overran. They went much further than you're supposed to as a pollster. I'm very cautious because there is a margin of error, and there's so many things that can happen. And one of the interesting things that happened was in that same poll, we had polled the constitutional amendment, and it was doing very well. And within, I would say, the last 3 or 4 days, for example, it just crashed. But Kennedy, Campbell, the numbers were correct. And what I said was, and I thought you did a good job in everything you talked about. It was the poll showed that Kennedy was the only candidate who wasn't landlocked to his particular area of who he represented. For example, Kennedy goes into Terrebonne and gets 40%. Boustany gets 12 or 14. Well, Boustany doesn't do well in his base of Acadiana. He's not going to make the runoff, and went up in the North Louisiana, and Kennedy runs right next to Fleming with Republican voters. Kennedy runs well all over the state, and that's a tribute to him and his campaign, his years of being around here. The third time is the charm for him. We've seen other people like Woody Jenkins run a lot, not win, but Kennedy actually pulled it off. And I thought his campaign was well run. I thought he had good ads. And, his ads were aimed at the sort of like Trump voters.
Right.
When I saw the ad on the weed killer, my first blush was, wow, what is that? But as you talk to people, they remembered that ad and they liked it. Whereas I've talked to people, that's a horrible ad. But, it appealed to his voters, and that's what was the difference. So, but it was an interesting race. And the other thing that you and I are watching is the congressmen and senators who come back home from Louisiana. They're not dominant people anymore. They don't come back here and run for governor and become governor. They don't come back here and run for the U.S. Senate. And because they're a congressman, they run, they dominate. The old days of Bennett Johnson and Billy Tozan and John Breaux and Henson Moore and Livingston, they were all dominant figures in Louisiana politics, but that's not the case anymore. You can't go to Washington because Washington is a place most people don't like. They still like their individual congressmen and maybe how they're voting. Mm-hmm. Overall, the whole system seems so broken to them, where if you come back home and say, look, I've done such a great job up there, give me a promotion, they're not willing to give them that promotion just on the basis that they are elected to Congress. And that's what stood out in this election.
Well, there was some early talk that Kennedy, at least based upon another poll, not yours, but that Kennedy, hadn't translated into a U.S. senator, that he was known quite well, of course, because of his TV and radio appearances, but that his persona just hadn't translated into some kind of federal office. But obviously, your poll indicated that he was at 25%.
Correct.
And that the other polls were incorrect, or weren't as accurate, I should say. And
well, if you go back and look,
that he did make that translation.
Yeah. Well, here's what happened. We had him at about 30% when during the session, when he was out there big time fighting with John Bell Edwards, and he had all that high name recognition. And if you'll remember, I cautioned John Kennedy and everyone else.
Right.
His numbers are inflated because he's out there. He's well known. He's a treasurer, and they're saying, "I like what you're saying about spending and taxing in Louisiana." It's with the legislature as a backdrop, but he wasn't 30%, and I knew it. I knew his numbers were inflated, and I all the candidates who talked to me, I said, look, this is about the publicity he's gotten. And I said, it's very similar to what Duke got when a poll I ran, when Duke jumps up and makes this huge splash on, I'm now changing my position and I'm against Common Core. And he was almost 40%. And, you know, the mistake he made was, and I warned him in every talk I gave, that this is inflated. Your numbers are inflated. That is not where you really are, because when this race starts, you've got to convince people why you want to be governor. You're popular as a senator. Kennedy went through the same thing. Kennedy's always, in the last 4 or 5 years, he's been in the 60s. Well, guess what happened when I ran the poll? I think it was in August or sometimes up in that area. Kennedy went from 30 to 20, you know, to like 19 or 20. And what happened was Kennedy sat there with that 30% thinking it was real, and other candidates started coming on television. And it was exactly what I said. It looked like the bottom had fallen out from under him. And I said that he hasn't yet run television telling people why they should vote for him as senator, not rely on his popularity as treasurer. Well, Kennedy went up on television almost immediately after that survey.
Right.
And he went up and did exactly what I thought he should do, which is tell people you've got to make a transformation from being the state treasurer into why you want to be senator, and you've got to convince them, because unless you convince them just because you're treasurer, it's not going to elect you. But he did a good job of that, and I saw some of these other polls. I have no idea what their methodology is or what their reasonings were, but we've been doing this a long time in Louisiana. I think we have the best calling list we have. We know who the voters are in Louisiana. We've been doing this a long time, and we don't call, we don't make robo-phone calls. We have operators. We're a sophisticated operation. We spend money, by the way. It's expensive to use the list we use, because those lists are tied to what we call likely voters and their phone numbers and the cell numbers. Plus, we're calling cell phones, which gets, if you're just calling landlines, you're missing 70% of the people now. So I think that's why we were successful. I never was worried about it. I mean, my partner is really a smart guy, Buster McKenzie, and he's a numbers cruncher. I'm the political guy. I understand what the numbers mean. And when I go out and talk about what, like Kennedy, Buster comes up with 30%, and I said that 30% is not real. Mm-hmm. That's the difference in Buster now, so we kind of complement each other on that. But the polls that show Fleming or showed Bustani and all these other polls, I don't pay attention to them. I know our numbers are solid, and I know we're going to be in the ballpark. But at the same time, you're correct. And Kennedy made the transformation, and he made it. He did a great job of convincing them that he's been a good treasurer. Now I'm going to vote for this guy to be my United States senator. And he not only since he was a statewide elected official, and you and I knew it, but it was a component that allowed him to be the eventual winner. He wasn't landlocked. Kennedy's not really from Baton Rouge. Kennedy's not really from St. Tammany. Mm-hmm. He's a statewide elected official, and that gave him a broad appeal, and he took advantage of it. Whereas Bustani did miserably poor. I mean, how can you run a campaign and go up in North Louisiana and you're congressman, you get 4% of the Republican vote. You get 11% in 12, 13% in some of the the parishes in deep South Louisiana. If you look at St. Tammany, where John Kennedy's, where he lives and where his base is, he just killed everybody over there. Well, if you're a congressman from North Louisiana, I can understand it. But if you're a congressman from Acadiana and you do that poorly, you're going to lose. And that's what happened to him. And I always knew that, because I've been in that world for a long time. I knew the African American vote, and get out the vote, and the endorsement by the governor was going to tip the balance towards Foster Campbell. Look, Carolyn Fayard was a good candidate. She had a good message. She appealed. The problem was, here's another one. John Kennedy in our survey was getting twice as many. If you added up Caroline Fayard and Foster Campbell's white Democratic vote, being both of them combined. So, that's why he was at 23, 24, 25. But that's a lot of votes when you have 5 candidates.
Yeah.
Plus you have 19 other ones who are taking 7, 8, 9, 10% of the white vote. So really and truly you had 5 candidates who were fighting for about 50% of the vote, 53%, 54. So you divide that into 5 and you're talking about 14, 15 points spread out among 5 candidates. So 25% is a big number considering how many strong candidates you had. And they were all good candidates. They were all articulate, and it was a competitive race. And by and far, I thought the theme of the campaign by the candidates was good. Most of the ads, a lot of the ads were just totally, I think, off message. I think these PACs, which you and I agree are a waste, they're there I think they're there to distract the campaign. I can honestly say if the Senate race was about the Senate race only in Louisiana, we might have had a 40% turnout, because most of the campaigns were not on message. I think it's some of the people doing these ads, and I know you're particularly incensed with a lot of it and how they say things and do things, and you're 100% correct. And I'm glad that you're one of the few people out there who attack these type attacks. Like John Kennedy and Hillary Clinton were in Washington, D.C. one time in their lifetime, so they're tied together. Barack Obama and John Kennedy voted for the same person 3 years ago, so he's linked to them. The public's smarter than that. They're just not buying this stuff anymore. We've overdone it. Barack Obama's leaving office, and he's a tough sell in Louisiana for Democrats, and Hillary was actually less popular than Obama. Obama's numbers look good compared to her. She just never got off the ground here.
Right.
The point is that Kennedy's ads were more in line with where Trump was, and most of the other candidates, I don't know who their consultants were and who were running their campaigns or who were doing their ads, but they were some of the worst ads Louisiana has ever seen. These people have no talent. They're not artists. And literally a 5-year-old could be more creative or have more imagination and come up with better reasons to vote against someone. You can find reasons to vote against someone, but some of the linkage that these campaigns go to now, and again, I'll give you credit, Stephen. You rail against that stuff, especially when it's so weak and thin, and the voters agree with you, and that's what we saw in this election. The voters don't buy into these linkages of since Obama's unpopular, anything and everything goes, unless, let's say that since John Kennedy went to Washington one time in his life, that means he's a supporter of Barack Obama. I mean, that's the absurdity of what we saw in some of these elections. But now we're faced with the prospects of the runoff, and I don't know how Foster Campbell runs. I don't know where he gets money. The National Democratic Party is not going to come in here and give him money. If I'm John Bell Edwards, I send him down, and if John Bell Edwards goes out there and campaigns for him, it's only going to hurt him, because as we're looking right now at the backdrop in Louisiana, if you're a Democrat, and this has really emboldened the Republicans in the legislature, you think he's had a miserable last year, the next 3 years are going to be really miserable for John Bell Edwards.
Yeah, he's in a tough spot then. I mean, if you think about it, because while right now he is viewed as a winner in terms of his candidate beating the other Democrat, Carolyn Fayard, but if he really sticks out his neck no-win situation just about, it seems.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if I'm
viewed as weak.
You got to call in John Bell Evers has to call him on the phone and get him to the mansion and say, look, we have no path to victory. We can't raise the money. It's going to alienate white. Why do we want to go through this? It'll hurt my legislative program. It'll hurt me personally. Let's shut this down and get out of the way and fight another day. And because it's not in the cards.
Well, I mean, we've seen that before in terms of Edwin Edwards against Buddy Roemer.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, that's happened before.
What's Kenny? You got to know when to play him and know when to fold him. Well, right now is the time when he should fold him.
Well, what strikes me, let me throw some out. What strikes me is what you said was that John Kennedy did as well with the white Democrats as the combination of Harry Bayard and Foster Campbell. That is pretty remarkable. I mean, right there. I mean, that's the Donald Trump vote, but
exactly.
But that that's pretty remarkable. That I mean, I'm not sure how in the world Foster Campbell could possibly be able to get that vote.
No, he can't. Kennedy's own message about jobs and anti-Washington and his weed killer ad was imaginative. A lot of people frowned, but it was on message with the Trump message. And this is another thing. There are white Democrats in this state. And too many Republicans act like they don't exist, but they do exist. They're not as big as they used to be, but they're an important component of our state. And those white Democrats help Republicans win. Mm-hmm. And you can't ignore them, and you should never not talk to them, because they're the people that suffer the most without the jobs, with the high cost of tuition in Louisiana. And it's one of the things that I really care about. I worked for the United States Senate for 10 years. I'm an independent now, but I was a Democrat all my life, mainly because of the job I do. But those are people that suffer the most. And they're the ones that are suffering in the Rust Belt with lack of jobs, whether you like it or not. NAFTA hurt them. It hurt from there all the way through New Hampshire. And they've lost jobs. Those people are they're paying higher premiums, and nothing's going up. And it's not anyone's particular fault. It is the fault of all politicians, and that's the way the public looks at it right now. But here in Louisiana, though, we have those same voters who they're white Democrats, and Kennedy resonated with them. And they're the consultants of most of these other campaigns are clueless if they didn't know that is an important component. And Kennedy spoke to them about their not being able to get help. Their Washington had failed them. It wasn't about Obama, and it wasn't about Hillary. The people who won across the country were talking to people about jobs, the economy, and their families, and the things that they have to face every day as citizens. And Trump's, tapped into that. And how the Democratic Party missed it, we'll never understand. And why she paid so little attention to the Rust Belt, but is mind-boggling. I can't, when you look back at this stuff, Stephen, you and I have been doing this for a long time, and when we look at we didn't know this stuff because we were fun, but you go back and we're looking at how she ignored all of those people up there, and they didn't turn out. Blacks did not turn out for her. I mean, and she lost Wisconsin. She lost Michigan for one reason. I mean, the blacks literally were 12-14% under Barack Obama both times. She went to Florida a lot, but the analogy to Louisiana is we still have 13, 14, 15, whatever it is, percent of white Democrats who vote. And you watch these campaigns, and this sharp conservative rhetoric just doesn't, just doesn't fit the real profile. You would think that every voter in Louisiana was Tea Party and religious right, but they're not. They make up, a decent portion, but they're about the same as some of the white Democrats. And they were in Kennedy's corner. And Caroline Fayard and Foster Campbell, in the last poll I did, they were not. I mean, their numbers were dismal at best. And Kennedy had those people, and he never lost them.
You're raising a question that I'm just wondering about, and that is that my impression is this: after this election, that you don't really have to, at this point in time, in order to win, you don't really have to have a plan. You just have to have a message. You don't have to have a plan that will take people from A to Z to fix a particular problem.
Campaigns are never about plans. Campaigns are about personalities. And where he was rough around the edges and crude and all of that, but a lot of the Reagan Democrats, that's their life. They curse and they drink and they go to football games, they go to hunting camps, they ride motorcycles. And they're a large segment of the American population, especially in the Midwest, not the East Coast or the West Coast. But they are, his personality and his message resonated with them. They may not have agreed with his language. They may not have approved of it and all of that, but they saw him as the only hope. He was the only one out there talking to them directly. And now look, there's a big difference in running for president and being successful. But one of the things I tend to believe about Trump is he's not an ideologue. And if the right wingers think that he's going to follow their creed, he's not. First thing he talked about to me, which was encouraging, was we need a big public work project to get this country working again. Well, who did that? Who said that the first day he took office? Barack Obama.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so he's going to follow along the lines of a populist message, not a right-wing conservative message. He can't. Nobody. If the Republican Party wakes up tomorrow or woke up Wednesday morning and realized that being a right-wing party ain't cutting it, and that's the populist message, the populist towards all people, especially with jobs, and not the right wingers or the left wingers. The voters are in the middle, and that's where he aimed his message, and that's where he's successful. But for those that think Donald Trump is going to be he's going to slash the budget, John Kennedy's rhetoric here is not what you're going to be hearing from Donald Trump in Washington.
Well, yeah, that's a very interesting point. As you were talking, I was thinking about exactly that. If I'm Foster Campbell, I'm thinking maybe that's the message. And I'm not saying it's a winning message, but it's the only message I can really think of at this point in time. Excuse me. And that is to say that John Kennedy, when asked how you're going to fix how you're going to have pre-existing conditions and get rid of Obamacare, during the televised debate, what he said was that, we have fraud. And he goes and he starts naming all these different programs where the federal government, spends stupid money, which is what he did in the state all the time.
Right.
Which to me is, I don't get it. I just think that's nonsense, but, why that?
Look, I know, and I'm not going to disagree with you.
But, the point I'm making, though, is, if I might, and that is that, looking at what happened, as you said, with the stimulus in 2008, early 2009, and all, to get this government going, what Donald Trump said at the, yesterday or Tuesday was that, we're going to do this. We're going to build the hospitals, the roads, the bridges, and so on. So that's public money. That's all it is. I mean, that is his explanation how we get out of this, as you mentioned. And when Obama said that, and when Hillary Clinton said that, I mean, they were blasted, particularly Obama. They were lambasted. So,
well, Stephen, the difference is he can say that all he wants, and I agree. But if he doesn't create the jobs, and he doesn't create the income, and he doesn't create the economy to support all of that, he'll be a failure. So the trick is, and it's not an easy trick to overcome him, but no, I know where you're going, and I'm saying you're correct. But what politicians say and what they do are most of the time somewhat different. And Trump's got out there and said, we're going to have a fantastic economy, we're going to have a fantastic country. The use of the word fantastic was probably the most used adjective in the history of politics. It's never, if you put the last 45 campaigns together, and Trump's use of the word fantastic would dwarf any other campaign in my lifetime. But
sure.
No, you and I know that's not practical. You and I know that those are incompatible. All of those things, and so that's your. But look, that's if Donald Trump says all of that, and Donald Trump can't make this happen, and Donald Trump, look, what Barack Obama tried to do, but I think Barack Obama's big mistake to me was, and he admitted it months and months later, he found out so shovel ready wasn't quite true. Remember he let the Congress write up the bill, and it was all about junk, not enough real spending. When you let congressmen go put all their pet projects in it, there was really never any hard evidence to the country, or you could point to huge monumental changes in the structure of the United States, because maybe a third of it, maybe more, was his mistake was to let the Congress, who the public knows when you let those people get together, it is going to be screwed up. And that was his big mistake on that.
If I can interrupt, I mean, focusing just for a second on the U.S. Senate election and this issue, again, I'm trying to think how Foster can, massage what you're talking about, and basically look in the camera and just say, look, John Kennedy is telling you that he's going to scrub the budget. He's telling you that he's going to find waste, fraud, and abuse. Donald Trump is telling you that he's going to spend money. Okay? How can you believe, and how can you trust John Kennedy when the president is telling you just the opposite? So I'm just throwing out to you that, if there's
Kennedy's reply would be, if the president, I'll vote with the president on projects that will help this country. I'm not going to go up there and be part of a Congress that's going to spend a lot of money on pork, and as they have been doing forever. I mean,
but that's all. I mean,
the problem is there's a bias against sending a Democrat to Washington. And to send a Democrat to be with Donald Trump is not. It's not. You are 1,000% correct on that. The technical details of what Kennedy is saying versus reality. And I'm not going to sit here and say that it won't help, but the problem is there's a bigger picture that is in play, and it's the sending another Democrat to Washington from a red state. It's not about Foster Campbell and your if this was Iowa, if this was Wisconsin, now that the election was over, and then there's going to be, I mean, Trump will have skeptical voters in the Midwest, and he's got to please. So if you're sending a senator up there, and they may say, well, let's send someone up there to balance the Republicans. Let's send the Democrat in the runoff. If there was a runoff between the Democrat and the Republican, but the Republican won. But that may change this time. If it would have been, the runoff would have been after Trump's election. But in Louisiana, that's not the consideration. There is a blind,
sure.
There's a blind allegiance to, or the theory of, we're not sending the Democrat up there, and no one. Look, if Mary Landrieu couldn't get reelected,
right.
She was powerful, popular, and articulate, and part of an institution. And Foster Campbell is not that articulate. And I would, your claim about hypocrisy,
sure,
I'm not going to argue with you. But the overriding political fact is that's not what will decide the election. What will decide the election is we're going to send someone up there to help Trump, and they're not going to get into the details. And that's what the polls, and that's what the political reality in Louisiana is. And I would hope that,
which means the details details really don't make any difference anymore.
Look, the details in the presidential, it's most of the time it's about personality. The personality of Bitter became a bad image. And that possibility always existed. Why he didn't see it or why he didn't think about it, I have no idea. John Bel Edwards was left alone. He was left to walk into the primary as a West Point graduate. I'm a hunter. I'm against abortion, and I'm not going to raise your taxes. And so it was about personality. Did people know what John Bel Edwards was? Did they know that he was what he predicted? They don't remember what he said. The Republicans have to remind people that he said this and he said that and he said that, but that really doesn't affect John Bel Edwards. What affects John Bel Edwards is the political climate. And the political climate is what normally dominates. And if you have the personality and you have the image to fit that, then you're probably going to get elected. In a perfect world, you're correct. And the hypocrisy of these people, as you and I know, if you and I wrote down what they said and what they did, or what they said yesterday and what they did 2 years ago, as you can do with Trump on anything and everything he did. Trump said we should change the Constitution and have the popular vote. He said that a few years back. They replayed it, and now he's. Does he want that today? How stupid a comment was that a few years back? But in the American public doesn't, fortunately or unfortunately, they're not into the details. It is an image.
That's exactly. That's exactly what it is. It's an image.
It's the image that these campaigns paint. But with Trump, though, you got to give him credit. He wasn't out there being a right winger. I mean, he was talking liberal stuff. He was talking about making going into the inner cities. And I would be, to be honest with you, if he doesn't accomplish anything else to help this country, and I think the Democrats have failed in that area miserably, somebody's got to go into the inner cities like Chicago and all across this country and come up with a way to fix that problem, because you can't keep wasting human resources like we are and then having to pay for it with all the government subsidies plus prison and all of that stuff. And he mentioned that a lot in this election. But to me, if you want to do something to really help this country, is we got to fix the inner cities. We have that in Baton Rouge, we have it in New Orleans, we have it in Chicago, we have it in Detroit. But he brought it up and he made it a point to talk about. Now, I hope the public doesn't forget that, because to me, Hillary Clinton didn't talk about that, not as much as she should have. Barack Obama hasn't spoken about it enough. And the I can easily sit here and say, well, why am I going to mess with that? Because I got a House and a Senate full of Republicans. They're not going to give me anything. But Donald Trump can't claim that because he's got the House and Senate. And if the Republicans want to endear themselves to the electorate, they got to fix things. They can't talk about we're going to cut the budget and we're going to reduce the deficit and we're going to lower your taxes and your life's going to be better. That is not selling anymore if you're a Republican. Throw that message out the window. People want the ability to, when they have a job, it's secure. When they have a job, they will get a raise. When they have a job, the cost of retirement or insurance is not going to wipe out their enough money to have a savings account. And that's what the problem is in this country. The ideology is getting in the way of where the American public is on their particular plight and situation. And if the Republicans can't fix that, 4 years from now, they'll throw Trump out. We may go back to gridlock, but at least the Republicans with their control, if I'm a Republican, I'm looking at the country and looking at the problems. You got to fix the problems. And if the right-wingers don't like it, they're not going to elect you. They don't elect people. They're an important point. But the evangelicals, you know what the evangelicals, they care about all that stuff related to, I mean, it's important, but they also care about jobs. And they also care about the future of the country and the economic status. If all of those people are making a decent living, that's normal, by the way. Jobs trump religion in every aspect with people. When you don't have a job, that's more important than am I going to have religious freedom in church. And that's what the American, I guess you think, the American politicians keep forgetting. The economy and jobs are the number one issue. The protection in the United States, defense, civil order, all of those things are important. But the economy is in jobs are the number one thing that people want to see better. That's the only way their kids are going to live a better life than they do. And again, if I'm Trump, I look at the inner cities and I come up with kinds of people and I start looking at ways to begin attacking a problem that has been plaguing this country for 50, 60 years. Has become even more as the urban areas have filled up and left the inner cities full of people who can't find jobs for them, and they cost an enormous amount of money to take care of. So I think, you know, I don't think Donald Trump thinks out of the box. I think the only reason he got the fundamentalists is not because of his economic policies, is because of the Supreme Court. But that's not going to stop him from fixing the inner cities. It's not going to stop him from, you know, he has to deliver on the economy and jobs, or he's a failure.
Well, you know, his solutions at this point in time are the trade deals, and I got to tell you, I mean, nobody has talked about the trade deals at least I haven't heard it, from the standpoint of the other countries and their response and their reactions. You know, Mexico is now looking at just saying, okay, fine, you know, we're not going to buy from you. You know, it's.
Well, look, we can punish Mexico more than they can punish us.
Yeah, but it's not just Mexico. It's not just Mexico, though.
I think you're going to find those two guys try to work out a solution, and it is not in Trump's best interest to throw them under the bus. And I look, he may do all of that, and it may turn out to be the most miserable, worthless decision America's ever made. That is very possible. I'm saying, if he looks at why he won, and he looks in the mirror and says, I told all these people I could fix this, he's got to fix it.
Yeah, exactly. That's that's really the problem. And, from my standpoint, given the fact that he has no experience in government, foreign policy, domestic policy, et cetera, given the fact that, he made these overarching promises, people are going to hold him to these promises, and I have no idea how he's going to be able to do it. I really don't.
If he is going to hang around and be controlled by the political hacks that you see, and I don't mean there, but Juliana and and all of these people, they're politicos that the Democrats and Republicans have on both sides.
Sure.
That's not what's going to fix the country. If he doesn't bring in Democrats and Republicans and smart people and look at new approaches to fix old problems, then, he's wasting my time and your time but Trump's not from the political inside. When he wants to build something in Ireland, he's got to go there and find people. And he knows after being in business and doing mega projects, when he sits down at the table and listens to these people talk related to his area, he knows who's in that room, and he's impressed by somebody. And if he hires them and they do a poor job, then, it costs him a lot of money. If he gets together with his cabinet, or he gets together with the people and he says, we got to fix this problem, if he's not smart enough or not savvy enough to figure out who really has a solution, that's going to determine where he passes or fails. Because if you listen, you and I have been in meetings where we listen to people and we listen to what they say, and there are some people that we really trust and we believe and we think they're smart and we think they can get something done. If you're going to listen to political hacks and part of the problem and the people who are coming out of the swamp, then you're in for a long 4 years. And if he doesn't bring in a new breed of people from the outside who are dealing with these problems on a daily basis, if you're going to listen to lobbyists and people who are there already, then you're headed for a long 4 years. And that's what the public told him. They want new ideas and they want new people. They don't like the people who are there. They're tired of all their promises and nothing gets delivered. Now, I'm not saying any of this is going to happen with Trump. I'm saying that's what, if Trump's going to be successful, that has to happen. There are people who don't believe it will happen. There are people who think that he's too narrow-minded. They think he's too stupid or whatever else you want to say. And that may be the case. I'm not arguing that. But I'm saying that if he wants to get something done, it's almost like common sense. And he doesn't seem to care about the insiders because no one's insulted him worse than he has. And if Trump wants to be successful, he needs to stay away from that crowd and bring in Democrats and Republicans, businessmen and women, stay away from Wall Street, because anybody who believes Wall Street's not for themselves primarily. But he has an opportunity, and and I'm saying all of this right now before he takes off. I may be saying 3 months from now he's the biggest dog we've ever seen. And that is very possible. It depends on him. We all hope that he can do something. He has that big aura of I'm going to get things done guy. Well, we're going to find out. And that's going to determine who Donald Trump is. And if he's a buffoon and he's full of hot air, it will not go unnoticed.
Yeah, without doubt. One last area that I'd like to ask you about, and that is the issue of the polls. Here's my take. On Tuesday afternoon, before before any of the results, I looked at a map, and it indicated that basically Hillary Clinton was going to clean Trump's clock.
Florida, North Carolina.
And I, my feeling was, and I stated this on Facebook, my feeling was, wait a minute, I understand polls. I don't think the polls are rigged, okay, despite what Trump and his people were saying. I don't think so. I think that what you have is, and this is what I wrote, I think that what you have is a situation where you cannot measure potential energy.
Right.
It's just something that that you cannot measure.
No.
And
well, look, Stephen, let me go back to what I said originally. There is something called a margin of error, and it's 4.5, that's 9%. That's a big area in between there. And pollsters act like they are the gospel, and they are not, because that number is a snapshot of the day and the night they finished. And in that area is 4 points, 4.5 points, 3.5 points, but 3.5 points, 7%, either way. And too many pollsters run out there and start talking about their numbers as if there is no margin of error, and this is correct. And hangers on to campaigns or pollsters. One of the biggest things that's my complaint is polling is not trusted because of the people who profess to be pollsters or handlers who run around pushing their polls. And I read some of the stories last week, and this is my comments, and it ought to be looking at. I'm talking about other pollsters. Some of them ought to be ashamed of themselves to even call themselves a pollster. Number one, there is a margin of error, and there are standards by which, and I keep talking about where pollsters and journalists should honor and be aware of. The margin of error, the way the question was conducted, who paid for it, and all access to all the material, if the person so desires. And some of the media has always done that. But to run out and because it's paid for by a candidate, and then you push it to the media and act like it's gospel. It is not. And the media has become the worst offenders. They're the ones that are supposed to control the pollsters. Let me make that real clear. The reporters are supposed to control the pollsters by demanding access and an explanation and telling the public to be cautious about this, because there is a margin of error. This is not an exact dead-on science.
Sure. But the pollsters really weren't wrong, in my opinion. They weren't wrong.
Let me tell you, there are several indicators that bothered me.
It's all really turnout. That's what you can't measure.
That's what I tell people all the time. My polls are accurate because I have done this enough years in Louisiana where I'm calling people who are going to vote. I'm calling people who are not going to vote, and I'm missing them, and I'm missing that surge. Then my poll's going to be way off. And the national polls, they were acting like a three-point lead by Hillary Clinton is the gospel. It is not. And the other thing is that everyone's pointing out, and it was something that was happening, the polls they were bouncing around every 20 days. The bottom would fall out of Trump. He'd come back up. But guess what was happening with Hillary? She was at 45, and when he lost 10 points 3 weeks ago, she did not gain 1 more percentage. And that was a telltale sign of she is where she is. But you know what? The media and the pollsters were looking at their point of view and not the objective point of view, and warning and telling the public, look, let me be cautious on this. She is not a cinch. There are some things here. If you look at poll after poll after poll, which I do, I went back 3 polls and brought you to where John Kennedy finished and why it seemed to be, it was fitting into exactly what I said. He was very popular because he was a treasurer. Then when the other guy started running, he wasn't on TV. I told everybody, well, now if he gets on TV and converts that treasury popularity, he's got to do it, or he won't win. And he did it. There is none of that in Washington. It's political and it's prejudice, and the media is whether it's Trump polls, Trump pollsters. When Trump's winning, the polls are skewed against me. We had that. I was called a liar. I was sued by goofy candidates. Rob Maness called me a liar statewide. Where did he finish? Where was my poll on Rob Maness? Was I dead on or what?
Mm-hmm.
But
right.
I have to put up with that because the media has no filter. And I see it a lot here in Louisiana of why are we publishing this junk? But I put up with it. But what it does is it destroys my partner and I. We're part of that. And polls are important not only for politics but for other stuff as to where people are. Business needs to know. Consumers, whether you can't put out a product if you don't trust polls. How are you going to put out a product and see if it'll sell?
Sure, no.
But my point is that nationally, polls became part of the political process instead of part of the scientific process.
It's my opinion that, number one, you can measure, the type of intensity. It's just something that you can't do as relates to turnout. And the other thing I think that where the pollsters, I'm not going to say failed, but did not get it correct, is that they were measuring things in terms of Democrat and Republican, and they didn't really ascertain the Democrat crossover. The former, say, Reagan Democrats, the current now Trump Democrats.
Yeah, and look, all polls become vulnerable to this, Steve. If a Democrat tells you I'm voting for Hillary, as they did in Michigan, and they don't vote, your poll is not correct.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
But that's why we have a 3 or 4% margin of error. To say there's some issues in there that can change, that make this science, these statistics vulnerable to things we don't know. So that's why we say margin of error.
Sure.
When someone tells Bernie Pinsonat on a phone call, I'm going vote for, it's real simple. If you call 10 people and 5 of them say I'm voting for Trump and 5 say I'm voting for Hillary, but Hillary supporters are not quite as energized as you just pointed out, and that person doesn't vote, my poll has it dead even. But you take that one person away, then Trump is going to win and my poll is wrong.
Right, exactly.
So just that simple.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah. Turnout intensity of turnout really does make a difference. Listen, Bernie, got to run. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I really do. And
we had a great discussion.